on this really important community issue. I've been astonished at the level of support and interest. I'm Susan Painter. I'm co-chair of the steering committee of the STOP Woodstock National Coalition. So the format for tonight will be a 3-minute video followed by a PowerPoint presentation. During the presentation, you're going to be muted, but you'll have the opportunity to ask questions in the chat. And once the presentation is complete, we're going to take about a half an hour to answer questions, and we will start by answering those that were put into the chat and continue with people raising their hands. So it's now my honor to introduce our first speaker, Patty Goodwin, the president of the board of the Woodstock Land Conservancy.
Who's sharing a computer right next to Susan. So before we really begin, I want to put out an immense message of gratitude to all of our compadres working to save this truly extraordinary piece of land. And I just want to mention some people on the STOP Woodstock National Steering Committee. It's co-chaired by Andy Mossy, who is not here in person with us this evening, but is still in the ethers, and Susan Painter, who's here with us. Also Kevin Smith, Darren Cohen, Melissa Peterson, and Ellie Reese of the Land Conservancy, Sonia Shoptaw, Gail Albert, and me, Patty Goodwin. We also have some great committee chairs that include Nancy Janeshill, Corey Smith, and Joe Otters. Our webmaster is Andy Shearer. And tonight we have two very special guests joining us for the presentation. Paul Rubin, the celebrated hydrogeologist, and a neighbor, a direct neighbor to the property, Tana O'Sullivan. Also, we want to thank the video producers, Matthias Rokel and Tevis Trower. Next slide, Ellie. We want to give a shout out to our partner organizations that include not only the Land Conservancy, but Sierra Club, Overlook Mountain Center, Catskill Mountain Keeper, Friends of the Bluestone Wild Forest, KingstonCitizens.org, and Town of Ulster Citizens.org. So everybody's heard the statement, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We want to show you some pictures. Ellie, we can't hear anything.
So sorry, Patty. Let me get that started again.
Okay, thank you. The pictures are coming up soon.
So sorry.
It's okay.
Since August 2023, Woodstock residents have put up signs that can be seen all over town. The message, Stop Woodstock National. But who is Woodstock National?
Woodstock National LLC is essentially a limited liability company that is putting together a proposal for essentially a major development. Instead of trying to preserve this land, they're trying to develop it. And now they're taking on basically the development of just 624 acres.
The site of the new project is just minutes away from the center of Woodstock, close to local businesses and nature preserves.
This is a truly significant property. It's over 600 acres. It is very likely the largest private property, especially in this part of Woodstock and the local area. It's 90 to 95% forested.
The proposal by Woodstock National LLC involves 191 housing units, luxury homes, villas, and townhomes, on-site water treatment facility, 18-hole championship golf course.
They've proposed an 18-hole championship level golf course. and they've proposed a heliport to be able to transport people to their luxury homes and to golf tournaments or up for the weekend.
All of this on one of the largest tracts of unfragmented forest in Woodstock, a critical corridor for wildlife.
This area is incredibly unique in terms of habitat, natural resources, wildlife, and so much more. I mean, we've seen bald eagles right next door in the Kingston Waterlands absolutely use this area as part of their feeding grounds.
The 620 acres of land sit within an area that the town of Woodstock recently designated a critical environmental area, indicating that this is especially deserving of protection.
That was a long process with lots of public hearings. And the real argument that stands out to me within that conversation, how unique all the lands are in this area. And the majority of this property that we're talking about, the 620 acres.
This forest is growing. It's sequestering carbon. It's providing critical habitat in these lowland areas just down in between the Catskills and the valley. It is filtering a tremendous amount of water. There are water bodies on the property, as well as wetland complexes and streams. And all of that drainage, all that drains right into the Sawkill Creek, right next to where they've proposed to put their wastewater treatment facility on the banks of the Sawkill.
This development raises urgent issues. Say no to a project that puts your environment and community at risk. We don't need more luxury homes. Go to stopwoodstocknational.org.
At Vistaprint, we can get your brand into your customers' hands or their heads.
Oh, no. Kevin?
Thank you. So I'm Kevin Smith. I am the board chair of the Land Conservancy. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Walrus property itself and what it's near, adjacent to, and near. This is, as you heard, a 625 acre property. It's 5 individual parcels that make up that total. 4 of them, roughly 520 acres, are in the town of Woodstock, and another little bit over 100 are just across the town line in the town of Ulster, which is very much part of the proposed development as currently shared with the community. As we mentioned, the property is almost 100% forested, with the exception of a 5 or 6 acre freshwater pond that you see on screen right now, as well as the airstrip. Those are the only really cleared areas of the entire 625 acres. Next slide, please. You see here in the orange color is the Walrus property, and the light blue next to it are the Kingston Water Department lands, Sawkill Reservoir, Reservoir number 1, and that is immediately adjacent to the Walrus property. Also in the light green rectangle at the lower right portion of the property is a New York State DEC property that is part of the Bluestone Wild Forest, as are the other 4 or 5 parcels off a little bit further to the east or to the right on the screen, right where it says Bluestone Wild Forest. In the dark green up at the top is the Land Conservancy's Israel Whitman Sanctuary. This is one of our newer preserves. It's now our largest preserve at 160 acres, and we are working actively right now to expand it further. Melissa Peterson, who's here to present tonight, has been instrumental working with our stewardship committee, and we've just completed a brand new trail loop. We have 3 trail loops on the sanctuary property right now. The other thing that we want to really point out here is how close this is to the biggest single portion of Bluestone Wild Forest. That is in the light green. at the bottom part of the screen next to the Ashokan Reservoir, where we're very proud of our work with the Ashokan Rail Trail and the support that our community gave to help make that happen. You see all the trails there, and you see the light pink or slightly rose parcel. That is a 208-acre property that was, we were very involved in the purchase of that by the Open Space Institute. It has since been conveyed to New York State. We now have 29 miles of connected trails, including a beautiful trail that goes right on the shoreline of Pickerel Pond. It is absolutely magnificent. If you haven't been there, you should go. Next slide, please. I just want to mention that the reason we call it Walrus is because the property is in, the legal name of the property is in a LLC, a limited liability company called Walrus Properties LLC. This map is a little bit different. We showed you, a map that showed property lines and that kind of thing. Now we want to show you a zoomed out. This is the 20,000 foot view. And what we're really looking at here is forest condition. This is from the Hudson Valley Natural Resource Mapper. It's an interactive mapper that anyone can go online and access these resources. And what I really want to point out here, you can see the oval red circle here is the area that includes Israel Whitman Sanctuary, Kingston Water Department lands, the New York State DEC parcel. And also I should mention, not on this map, but you'll see it a little bit later on, there are another 160, 180 acres. The Ruby Rod and Gun Club lands are immediately adjacent to both the Walrus property as well as our Israel Whitman Sanctuary. So we guesstimate there are at least 1,200 acres of undeveloped, still undeveloped and unfragmented forest. This is truly a treasure right here at the edge of the Catskill Park, literally almost at the boundary of the Catskill Park, only 2-3 miles from the Hudson River and the Thruway corridor. It's a bounteous property. The periwinkle blue here, the last thing that I want to show you is that the natural resource mapper ranks forest condition according to 12 factors. And all this that you see in the periwinkle blue, running up, it's if you're heading out Route 209 towards Stone Ridge, the ridge up on your right, or if you're headed out Hurley Mountain Road, right on your shoulder, that hillside on your shoulder, that is all lands, much of it in private hands, but some of it you'll see in the darker blue is protected and state forest. That is all ranked in the 95th to 99th percentile in terms of forest condition. So you'll see the accomplishment that New York State and partners have realized here with the largest portion of bluestone wild forest squarely in that very, very highly ranked high condition forest. This area that we're talking about here tonight that centers on the Walrus property and the Woodstock National proposal and the associated undeveloped lands is a huge resource for our area. This could be the real corridor that connects the upland forests with the valley floor and that provides migratory paths for animals and habitat and preserves the lungs of this area in terms of intact forest. It's a beautiful property. It's crisscrossed with woods roads and trails that connect to other woods roads and trails all the way up to Ruby Main Street, Hallahan Hill, DEC parcels up there and elsewhere. It really truly could be a magnificent conservation and recreation resource for not just our community, certainly for our community, but also for the region. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Peterson, Woodstock Land Conservancy's Land Acquisition and Stewardship Manager, and I'll talk a little bit about the developer's plans as we understand them. So on July 20th of 2023, two developers from Woodstock National LLC, both former employees of WeWork, brought the sketch plan to the Woodstock Planning Board for a pre-sketch presentation. Included in their sketch plan, and Ellie should be using a cursor to sort of, yeah, there we go. So she's going to point out what I'm talking about specifically. Included in the sketch plan would be 191 units of housing. 114 of those would be in the town of Woodstock. 77 would be in the town of Ulster. And included in that 191 units of housing would be townhomes and short-term rental villas. They also proposed an 18-hole member-only championship golf course with a golf club and various built amenities. The golf course alone would take 175 acres. Additionally, there would be a wastewater treatment facility on the banks of the Sawkill Creek and a heliport, enabling people to fly in and out to golf. The townhomes would be in the town of Ulster, but the majority of the development acreage would be in the town of Woodstock, and nearly all of the town of Woodstock portion is currently a designated New York State DEC critical environmental area. The developers have unofficially indicated that they may, in fact, remove the golf course and heliport, but until a formal application with a new project proposal has been submitted, we really have no idea what they plan to do. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Okay, so the Xena Woods Critical Environmental Area. The map here shows the green area that's been designated as a critical environmental area. The red shows the location of the proposed development, the currently owned Walrus LLC property. The entire property, as you can see, is overlapping between the critical environmental area and the proposed development. So this formal designation as a critical environmental area has been adopted by the town of Woodstock, and it was registered with the state of New York in June. So what is a CEA, and what does that have to do with the Woodstock National property? So this designation particularly recognizes the importance of a property for ecological services to the human community, valuable habitats for wildlife and plants, and support of local ecosystems. It is not regulatory, and it does not carry any land use restrictions. But while it may not have a legal force of zoning, it's an extraordinary expression of community intention regarding the vital importance of this area. And importantly, it gives our planning board in Woodstock the guidance it needs to consider the important ecological features. It has included the natural resource inventory, which extensively surveyed the property, and it asked the planning board to consider the surrounding area and its impact on the surrounding area, not simply the proposed site. Next slide. So when we think about the impact that this proposal could have on this gorgeous, pristine forest, you're going to hear a lot of ideas tonight. You're going to hear about the impact on the human community, things like flood resilience. You're going to hear about the value of the habitat for plants and wildlife and endangered wildlife. You'll hear about water resources and ecological systems. These impacts would begin at the point of the beginning of construction. First shovel in the ground, there's already going to be an impact. Next slide. So we're estimating 5 to 7 years from the point of the first shovel in the ground. And I want you just to imagine for a moment the noise pollution as they blast the bedrock for 191 or more homes, and the swimming pools that will also be part of those homes. I want you to imagine one cement mixer arriving every 4 hours, going up windy, narrow roads, and the flatbeds hauling lumber down the beautiful Sawkill Road that when I pass, I see the eagle waiting there on the tops of the ash trees. Now that would have numerous flatbed trucks hauling lumber. And picture now the 2,400 workers on site at the height of production. They'll require bathrooms. They're probably not carpooling. Picture those 2,400 cars, food, etc. The impact from construction onward is profound. Next slide.
Hey, everyone.
Ellie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Reese, Program and Outreach Coordinator for the Woodstock Land Conservancy. For my work with local experts on the Woodstock Pollinator Pathway Project and the Woodstock Bear Task Force, I have become keenly aware of the cascading harmful effects of habitat loss. The proposed Woodstock National LLC development would fragment and threaten more than 620 acres of the highest quality forest habitats in Woodstock. The clearing required for a development of this size for new roads, homes, facilities, and open recreation areas will disrupt a variety of rich habitats in an area designated as a critical environmental area, causing a decline in habitat quality and health, disrupting wildlife movement, and facilitating the spread of invasive plant species. Pictured here are 3 endangered or protected species that have established habitat on the site. The Xena Woods CEA, which this development would lay almost entirely within the bounds of, identifies several types of important habitat, including upland forests, shrublands, meadows, forested swamps, vernal pools, ponds, marshes, other wetlands, and many small streams. The portion of the map shown in gold, excuse me, I'm sorry, here we go. The portion of the map shown in gold here is identified as habitat of rare or endangered species, most notably the bald eagle and the northern long-eared and Indiana bats, 2 bat species whose populations have already been decimated by disease. You may notice these critical habitats cover almost the entire proposed development area. And I'm going to point out a few spots here. This right here in bright pink is the current airstrip, which is in the upper right-hand corner of the map shown previously that shows the development area. So you'll notice that this entire area here covers almost the entirety of that development. Restrictions on tree cutting exist in critical endangered species habitat and aim to protect threatened bat species and rare bat foraging areas like those identified on this map. Invasive plants outcompete native species that provide adequate habitat for native wildlife. Invasive plant species have profound negative effects on our native ecosystems by altering habitats, lowering biodiversity, and causing long-lasting economic hardship for private property owners and municipalities alike. Of the 5 basic land management strategies recommended to avoid the spread of invasive plants, 3 would be impossible to adhere to if this development project moves forward. Stopping the movement of invasive plant materials and seeds, the movement of workers, materials, and equipment during the clearing and construction phases can and will spread seeds. Reducing soil and vegetation disturbances. Disturbance caused by clear cutting and construction can allow invasive plants to colonize new areas. Maintaining desired plant communities. A healthy plant community with native and desirable plant species provides resistance to invasive plant establishment. Fragmenting forest habitats reduces the health of plant communities. The Woodstock National Development will almost assuredly cause invasive plant species to spread into and impact not only the incredibly rich forested habitats on the site, but far beyond. threatening the health of habitat in surrounding properties, including Woodstock Land Conservancy's Israel Whitman Sanctuary, conserved specifically to provide sanctuary for native wildlife. It is abundantly clear that this development will decimate the rich forested habitats on site and have a negative impact on surrounding habitats as well. Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to find Paul.
Paul Rubin.
We have a long list of folks on the meeting, which is wonderful, but it makes it a little bit harder for me to find our wonderful guest speakers.
As you all may know, Paul Rubin was instrumental in helping us convince Terramore to leave the area. He's an incredibly important hydrogeologist in our area.
My name is Paul Rubin. I wear 3 hats: professional geologist, hydrologist, and hydrogeologist. Water, as seen here, is a precious natural resource. Let's take a look at water-related considerations relative to the proposed Woodstock National Development Project. Next slide. The project area, outlined in red here, borders the Schuylkill Creek on its southern side. Notice on the western portion of the slide that this project area is close to one of Kingston's reservoirs, some 450 feet from its southern border and only 900 feet from its western border. Surface runoff throughout the project area there, within the area, flows from a large wetland into a Kingston reservoir. Elsewhere, runoff primarily flows southward into the Schuylkill Creek. There is an exception to the far northeast, where surface flow is to the northeast. Significantly, the green hexagon, located within a 100-year and 500-year floodplain of the Schuylkill, is where the project applicant has proposed their wastewater treatment area. This must be changed. Consider, while looking at the same map, that well drilling and aquifer testing will be required to determine whether there is sufficient groundwater available. Will, for example, aquifer testing reveal that bedrock fractures are hydraulically connected to the Kingston Reservoir? This is a very real consideration, because not far away, groundwater pumping at the proposed Terramore glamping project revealed direct impact of wells as far as 2,500 feet from pumping wells. Next slide. When assessing potential adverse environmental impacts of development projects, it is important to assess what adjacent landowners may be impacted. The northern portion of this map shows adjacent landowners through which surface water flows from the proposed project area onto and through their properties. These include the City of Kingston land in light orange, New York State lands in a darker orange, Ruby Rod and Gun Club, that's in the light blue area, the Woodstock Land Conservancy, including the Israel Whitman Sanctuary, that's in yellow, as well as the Schuylkill Creek itself. Next slide. Back one. Up one slide. The proposed large scale of the development project will require a substantial groundwater supply to get permitted for a public water supply. Addressing this will require well installation, 72-hour aquifer tests, and water quality testing. It would be prudent to complete this work prior to advancing any further project application work. Single sewage treatment facility, for example, in the back of the Schuylkill, it's proposed for entire development. That's down in the bottom right in that pinkish area. Sewage from 77 townhouse units located in the Ulster parcel would be transported across the municipal line to the facility in Woodstock, and the treated effluent discharged into the Schuylkill. Next. Should say harm to wetlands at the top. We're looking for a slide that says harm to wetlands at the top.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. The file just closed on itself. I'm going to find that correct slide shortly and then open it right back up for you.
I just want to thank the people who are participating tonight for your kind words and your patience. You have been so supportive of any glitches we've had, and it really means a lot. So thank you for your very sweet chats.
Thank you.
Here we go. All right.
Right. The 625 acres is virtually 100% forested, with the exception of the rural Strip in the Woods airstrip, and includes a beautiful woodland pond. It's a 6-acre pond. There are a number of high-quality wetlands, wetland complexes, and vernal pools that would be negatively impacted by project development. Next slide. Water filtration risk. The forest provides a significant water filtration function for surface waters flowing into the Sawkill, water filtering down into the groundwater, and the fractured bedrock aquifer. All of these provisions are potentially at risk. Next slide. Wastewater septics and water treatment facility. A single sewage treatment facility on the back of the Sawkill is proposed for the entire development. Sewage from 77 townhouse units located on Ulster parcel would be transported across the municipal line to facility in Woodstock, and the treated effluent discharged into the Sawkill. Next slide. Let's look at the effects on the Sawkill and lower Esopus creeks. Clearing of so much forest land, adding blacktop to pervious surfaces, plus pollution and runoff from the golf course, and related effects of operation of a huge resort development would all change the water quality draining into the Sawkill Creek. This is happening barely 3.7 miles upstream of its confluence with the lower Esopus Creek, which is already considered an impaired stream by New York City DEC and US EPA. Land clearing, grading, and construction are likely to produce substantial sediment-laden runoff that may adversely impact site wetlands and the Sawkill Creek, thereby contributing to high turbidity levels in the lower Esopus Creek. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tana O'Sullivan, and I live on Eastwoods Drive. A suburb of this magnitude and density will destroy the rural character of Xena Highwoods, along with the peace and quiet that many of us bought and built here to enjoy, hoping to preserve it and leave it for the next generation as pristine or better than we found it. Here is a short list of some of our neighborhood concerns. The 5-acre zoning requirement seems like the only thing that protects us from this type of cookie-cutter development, characterized by densely clustered homes on little lots of land. But it isn't profitable for them unless it's all built on small, non-conforming lots. Why would we exempt them from our protective laws? The widening and paving of Eastwoods Drive will be necessary to accommodate the weight and volume of trucks to build the 77 townhomes, golf course, 4-story apartment buildings, and whatever other size inappropriate development gets planned for this private 1-lane dirt road that Woodstock National will own in its entirety. Will the town and the highway department take over Eastwoods Drive and the other roads associated with this project? There may be good reasons why the town has never taken over it before. Do we become responsible for the fire, ambulance, and police service all the way to Ruby and within the town of Ulster, because Woodstock is the only access to this development? Do we become responsible for the new sewer district and the sewage treatment plant when this developer moves on? Please come walk on Eastwoods Drive and see the pink surveyor's tape showing all the wetlands that will be damaged by the widening, asphalt, and winter road treatments, in addition to the setting back of utility poles and the construction in and around the wetlands and streams. Woodstock National's topographical maps for Eastwoods Drive do not appear to show a widened road, and the proposed houses are close to the road because they are being squeezed in front of a DEC wetland and buffer area, a portion of which is in the backyard of each of these undersized lots. Children, residents, and visitors will inevitably explore their backyards, explore the woods, and trespass on those wetlands. Where is the buffer for those of us who live on Eastwoods Drive? Next slide, please. Turning to traffic issues, Xena Highwoods Road is where the other part of this development is proposed, with both primary and secondary egress for the 114 home enclave. But it's all downhill and blind curves from Xena Rec over the bridge and then to Sawkill Road. Is the bridge on Xena Highwoods wide enough and strong enough for this volume of construction vehicles and the increased traffic patterns? I expect an increase in accidents between their construction vehicles and our pedestrians and bicyclists, including a lot of dog walkers here, people pushing baby carriages, elderly walkers and joggers, not to mention those of us who drive to and from work every day. This is also the same half-mile stretch where parents drive their children to Xena Rec's daily programs. If you don't know exactly where this is, Eastwoods Drive, the townhouses, the golf course, the rental villas, and the heliport and more, this is all behind Xena Rec. And please be clear that Xena Highwoods Road is narrower than Sawkill Road. It's not even legally wide enough to have a white stripe down its center. After construction is done for 200 or 300 homes, we'll have 300 or 400 new residents and all their cars, which this road was not designed for. There will also be an increase in deer and bear strikes and in bear to human contact that will result from the wildlife that will be driven out of our pristine forest and into the traffic of Xena Highwoods Road and the yards of those of us who live here. Next slide, please. And then there's the sound pollution, the noise, light, and air pollution that will come from 5 to 7 years of logging and construction. During what hours will the clear cutting of the forest be allowed? Will the burning of trees be permitted? Will night lighting be installed to extend work hours? Will secondary crews log and construct on weekends? Will there be any peace and quiet during those years for those of us who live here? If your neighbor's leaf blower bothers you, imagine generators, mowers, and power tools required to take down the forest and build a couple of hundred homes all day, every day, for the next 5 to 7 years. If you come look at Xena Highwoods Road, you'll see why everyone is walking and riding here, because it's safe, beautiful, peaceful, and quiet. But if you put this suburban development here, it will no longer be safe, quiet, or peaceful, and its beauty, like the residents, will suffer. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patty Goodwin, president of the board of the Woodstock Land Conservancy. From the Conservancy's work to protect the greater Bluestone Wild Forest, and I want to say that we particularly benefited from Paul Rubin's important research on this. We now know that this area is far more historically and archaeologically significant than was previously recognized. This includes Paul's work on the location of the historic Wagonk Trail to Xena and Woodstock. Still existing in the Bluestone Wild Forest are portions of this trail that were created by Native peoples and later used as the primary wagon road to Xena. The Wagonk Trail passed through or passes through or very near this walrus property. This is the wrong slide, Ellie. You're one slide ahead right now. Can you go one slide back?
Working on it.
Okay, everybody, don't pay attention to this.
Just continue speaking, Patty. I will catch up.
Okay, thank you. So, as I was saying, the Wagunk Trail passes through or very close to the Walrus property. And in addition, the New York State Unit Management Plan for the Bluestone Wild Forest also confirms that this entire area was within the ancestral lands of the Muncie Esopus people. And we want to thank Ken Panza for bringing this to our attention. Here we are. Great. Thank you, Ellie. So continuing on this, over the years, hikers on this property, the Walrus property, have documented the presence of potentially significant structures, which may date from the pre-colonial era. If this is confirmed, these observations would indicate that these are sites that are sacred to the Muncie Esopus people, who lived on and very wisely stewarded this land over the course of millennia. So, to conclude, this site is very clearly deserving of further study before any development should happen. The town of Woodstock must require this study, and us as advocates must demand it, that it be included as part of a seeker environmental review process. Okay, Ellie, now to the gate slide, please. So, community needs. Woodstock National appears to be a luxury resort housing development that's designed to attract a wealthy second homeowner market. We all know that this is not the kind of housing that we need. Woodstock and Ulster County, through committees and task forces, have identified the affordable sector of housing as that which we do critically need for the people who work here, the people who volunteer here, and they are people who very often cannot afford to live here. Affordable housing will help restore and preserve the economic diversity, which is critical to the well-being and vitality of a community like Woodstock. It's one of the things that was really a hallmark of Woodstock in previous generations. And now we can all see that that's increasingly rare. The developers have said that they'll build a token number of affordable housing units. From the plan that we've seen, those seem to be cloistered off across Sawkill Road, far from their luxury homes in the main part of the property. Whether this affordable housing will be built, when it will be built, how much of it exactly would be built, when, we don't know. It's our understanding right now, to shift focus a little bit, it's our understanding that under both our current zoning regulations and the new proposed zoning regulations, the plans that have been put forward to date by Woodstock National are problematic unless they are granted significant zoning variances. Both the STOP Woodstock National Steering Committee and the Woodstock Land Conservancy are each studying carefully both sets of regulations to understand how each would limit this development, which we believe is the largest ever to happen within Woodstock. All of us want to see this land conserved, but if development looms, we deeply hope that the zoning will be strictly enforced. So the bottom line, Woodstock National appears to be designed as an elite luxury community, and it is completely out of character with the culture of Woodstock, as it has been created over generations of local families, artists, and small business people. Thank you. Amen.
Thanks, Patty. I'm going to talk just a little bit here about forest carbon sequestration and the role that forests like that in the Bluestone, the greater Bluestone Wild Forest, and on this property plays locally. I am not a scientist. However, through some really generous assistance from Ken Panza of the Woodstock Climate Smart Communities Committee, based on research that he has done, I was able to do some kind of back of the napkin calculations. These are not exact by any means. This is very complex science. And researchers, spend whole careers developing really accurate models for carbon sequestration. So, but with that said, we can make some estimates, a rough estimate, that 1 acre of unmanaged Catskill forest sequesters approximately 1 metric ton of carbon a year. And because of photosynthesis, this results in 3.66 metric tons of CO2 removed from the atmosphere. So on Walrus property, we mentioned that 625 acres. We take away the airstrip and the pond, which are virtually the only unforested parts of the property. And we multiply that out, we have approximately 2,200 metric tons of CO2 removed from the atmosphere by the forests on Walrus property, year over year over year. If you, for instance, take the 18-hole golf course that they have on the only plan that they have shared with the community, they stated that 175 acres would be needed, just a forest would have to be cleared just for the fairways and the greens. So if we do that calculation, we're talking 175 metric tons of additional carbon that's being liberated to the atmosphere from the trees that have been sequestering the carbon being taken down. And we have a loss of 640 metric tons of CO2 that would otherwise be removed annually from the atmosphere year after year after year. How many acres does the Woodstock National proposal involve? Clear cutting forest. It has to make way for roads, driveways, utilities, single family luxury estate home sites, the townhouse sites in the town of Ulster portion of the property, and all the required setbacks that are required by zoning code, et cetera. We don't have a number for that. We can be very certain that it's going to be significant. And this brings us really, next slide, please. This really brings us to the overriding issue here. I don't think in Woodstock on a Zoom town hall like this that we need to convince people that climate change, that the effects of climate change are not an abstraction anymore, that they happen in other places, but they don't happen here. Just this last June, we had multiple days. We never anticipated that here in the Catskills, that we would have air that was so poisonous to breathe that people could not go outside. And that air was coming from wildfires, unprecedented wildfires, both in scale and location across the northern reaches of Canada. Also this summer, we have temperature indexes in large swaths of the country that are approaching the limits of what's actually survivable for human beings. The impacts of climate change are accelerating. They're starting to converge. We have overlapping catastrophes. The photograph here and the caption, this is from Mamaroneck. This was taken 5 days ago when a small weather front that was forecast to be a minor event converged with another one, and suddenly there was catastrophic flooding. This is 70 miles from the project site. And as we all know now, but for the vagaries of weather patterns, this could have just as easily have happened right here in Kingston, right here in Ulster County and Woodstock. We've seen these catastrophes in the past. we have had catastrophic hurricanes and tropical storms devastate our areas. I cannot tell you what it's like to travel through these communities that have literally, the community centers have been wiped out. They're overwhelmed because they sit on the banks of creeks and rivers. We are now faced with the prospect of responding to the threats, the challenges, and the opportunities of climate change. But we are doing that with infrastructure that was built 100 years ago, infrastructure that was built for the 20th century, while we need to have infrastructure that is built for the 21st century. So next slide, please. I want everybody to think about what we have here in abundance. We have water, and we have a beautiful, bounteous, natural environment. We are so fortunate here in our region. Other people are seeing what we have here increasingly as other places become untenable, as insurance companies pull out of states like California and Florida. Increasingly, people are going to be looking to move to our area. We need to really start thinking long and hard, and we need to get much smarter, much quicker about the kinds of development that we really need to be doing in the next century, and the kinds of conservation we need to be doing to enable these communities to be vibrant and sustainable for the long term. Thank you.
So as I've been watching the chat, it's very clear. First of all, we're not just preaching to the choir. There are a number of people who just wanted more information. There are many people on this call who do agree with us that we need to stop Woodstock National. But I want to point out that we're going to talk about ways that you can all get involved. And we know that our town listens. We're very fortunate that we have a planning board and a town board that will listen to our concerns. So let's just remember that most of us on this call are already ready to take some action. So here's some ways for you to get involved. But I just also want to remind you that after this little call to action, we're going to have a Q&A, and we'll take about 20 minutes to a half an hour to answer some of the questions from the chat, and also answer some of the questions that you ask during the Q&A. Unfortunately, some people were unable to get in on time, and so they missed the beginning of the presentation, where I see a number of the questions on the chat had already been answered. So if you could stop using the chat now just for a moment, we're going to be doing the Q&A in about 2 minutes.
Hey, Susan, I wonder if I could, this is Kevin, I wonder if I could pick up a stitch that I forgot earlier on. Would that be okay?
Sure.
I see questions in the chat coming in, and I omitted mention that the Woodstock Land Conservancy has been involved with partner organizations to help expand the properties within the Bluestone Wild Forest, going back since 2005 now is when we started. And I mentioned the one big recent acquisition between Onteora Lake and Maury Hill Road. But we have been working to conserve the walrus property as well. And our partners at the Open Space Institute, we were working with them and working with New York State DEC. And in 2020, OSI, as we call them, did make an offer. They were unable to come to an agreement with the owner of walrus properties. It's challenging in the current real estate market with the escalating prices that have ensued over the last several years. And but we continue to be very interested in seeing this property conserved if at all possible. It's an incredibly high priority conservation property in our view. And there is a purchase option in place. The developers, the Woodstock National developers, have a purchase option agreement with the owner of the property. And at some point in the coming weeks, they will either be moving forward or not. But our interest will continue to be, if at all possible, seeing this property conserved. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin, that's an important clarification. And I also wanted to clarify that the planning board is not able to do anything until they get a formal application. So you've heard why this property is really important for our community and for our planet and for our kids. If you want to get involved, our website has much of the information that you'll need at stopwoodstocknational.org. On that site, you can sign up for email updates with the WLC. You can find out when you can get a sign and where you can get a sign. You can find our Facebook page, but we are having regular conversations on Facebook and Instagram. So if you can post and share information, if there are images you think are particularly powerful, sharing and spreading the word. As someone mentioned in the chat, we had 328 people register for this, but we have 6,000 people in Woodstock. So the people on this call who are motivated enough to come out and listen are the ones who can get the rest of the people to participate. The other thing is that you can attend planning board or town board meetings in the town of Woodstock and Ulster when Woodstock National, when and if they're on the agenda. You can purchase a sign. Darren will be out at the farmers market tomorrow, I believe around 4 o'clock, which is across from the colony. You can attend our benefit concert. Next slide. That's going to be held on the 22nd, a Sunday at 7 p.m. And some incredibly generous, wonderful musicians, Marco Benevento and friends, Simi Stone, you can see the names on the screen, have volunteered their time. And I think some of you have seen the incredible drawings of Zoe Keller. People have stepped up, artists, musicians, writers. The film that you saw at the beginning, all donated because people are so motivated. We have an incredible community. So attend the concert, help us raise funds. And then on Saturday, the 14th, we have the Scarecrow Festival put on by the Woodstock Land Conservancy. We're going to be making protest signs at our booth that day, and we are planning a protest. We're looking for a final location for that, and we will let you know on the website. Or if you've signed up for our email list, you'll get that by email. We also want to make sure that people write letters to the editor, to HV1 and the Daily Freeman. And as someone mentioned in the chat, send letters to the developers, your government, your town government, your local government, your state government. And I think those are the main things. And I'd like to turn it over now to Ellie.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. So now it's going to be time for questions. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of outline to you how we're going to handle questions today. There have been very many questions in the chat. We are going to answer a bunch of questions that have come in already through the chat. And then we will start fielding questions live. So in a moment, I will stop this screen share. You will be able to see everybody on the screen. Once we get to that point and the rest of the coalition agrees, I will ask folks to use the raise hand function to indicate that they would like to ask a question live. You can find that raise hand function in your toolbar, your Zoom toolbar, either at the top of your screen or at the bottom of your screen. It will either be in the 3-dot more button, and then you can scroll down to reactions, and then you can find the raise hand function in there. And then when called upon, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. So please do wait until your name has been called to unmute yourself when it is time. And now I am going to turn it over to Susan once again so that the question and answers can begin.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. So I just want to say that we will have a copy of this recording of the presentation for you to share with friends and family and anyone you know on social media by email so that we can get the word out on what's really at stake here. And what can residents do to stop this? I'm hoping that you can begin with the pieces that we shared as our call to action. And Anula asked, where would 2,400 workers live? Now, we do have that number from several studies that were done on what it would be at peak production. And I think, Anula, do you want to speak more about that question?
Sure. Hi. I actually had a different question, but this one, the one that you just raised, Susan, is really important to me because I feel like this resembles in many, many ways the work camps that are put on the indigenous lands where a whole bunch of workers go out there and they suddenly infiltrate little towns and the town can't support it, not the police, not the fire. And suddenly people are making a whole lot of money that they did not make before, and crimes, particularly against females, skyrocket. And this has been proven for decades and decades. So I'm very concerned about that, actually.
Thank you, Anula. And Ellie, could you just put the people's faces up and we can take the images off? Thanks. Okay, great. Patty, you want to?
Well, one of the things that was asked was, what can we do as residents to stop this? And I would refer everybody to the call to action slide and all the things that Susan recommended. Another question was, who has the ultimate decision-making authority? And along with that, we must make sure that the assessment process, the environmental review process, is carried out by consultants who are independent, who are not beholden to the developers. So, Kevin, do you want to talk about who has the ultimate decision-making authority? Very briefly.
I'm not an expert, and there are a few experts on this call, so I'm not going to try not to get above my pay grade too much. I think it depends on what's in, if an application is submitted, what's in that application. That will determine, which bodies have necessary approvals over the project in order for it to proceed. Generally speaking, and I'm speaking very generally here, it could easily be the planning board in the town of Woodstock that would be the main board that is responsible for reviewing the application and making a determination whether to permit it or not, and under what conditions, if so. I will say that part of the process for a proposal like this will include the New York State Environmental Quality Review. And that's a very significant process. And we're very fortunate in New York State to have seeker. It is there to ensure that proposals, when they're brought forward, are fully transparent in terms of what they entail and what kind of impacts and potential impacts they may pose to the natural resources, to the human community, and to the community character and so forth. I believe now that climate change, because of the law that was recently passed in New York State, that climate change is now a part, one component of the seeker process. We've been through a few of these at Woodstock Land Conservancy. Susan, in her work with the Stop Terramore Coalition, has experience with this. Niagara bottling came to town over at
So
Bluestone
Kevin,
Wild
can I
Fork, 28
Kevin,
next
I
onto
wanted
your
to
lake.
interrupt you.
Mhm. Yeah, go
Kevin,
ahead.
I wanted to just add in here,
Mhm.
Mr. Quigley from Ulster has
Mhm.
also said in one article I read that he was willing to have Woodstock be the lead community. But there's also the planning board in Ulster that has to make these decisions. And that's why we did mention that one of the actions would be to also attend the planning board meetings in Ulster. They also have an active coalition in Ulster. And I believe that Kingston's going to need to get involved too, because it could impact their water. And it's the Kingston School District that would be the local school district. So there would be a number of government agencies involved. Yeah.
We're a long way from a seeker process at this point. But
Yeah.
suffice to say, if an application is submitted, we will absolutely be engaging on the seeker process to ensure the fullest, most comprehensive look at the project and all of the impacts associated with it. And we will be working with the community to educate everybody so that you know what seeker is involved and how you can engage to make sure that every single stone is turned over and no inappropriate development is permitted.
And I think we learned in our ongoing effort against 850 Route 28 that when the community shows up, people pay attention.
Absolutely.
So everybody needs to keep on showing up.
Another, Radhika, we're going to call on you in just a moment. You'll be next, and Patty's just going to answer one more question from the chat, and then you're next, okay?
Another question that came up was, is it true that the developers have decided not to build the golf course? And we have heard reports that they have decided not to build the golf course, that the configuration of the plan may have changed. But the bottom line is, we've only seen one plan so far. We have not yet seen another plan, and we really will not know exactly what they intend to do until a formal application has been made. So right now, we're trying to give them the message about what we want and what we don't want, make it very clear to the town and to all the officials involved what we want and what we don't want. And we need to keep doing this through the process. If the developers were to step away and a conservation proposal came up, then we would support that. But if development happens, this is going to be a long process of working to see that the best thing for the property and the planet happen, and that we all support that.
Thanks, Patty. Rachel Marco Havens, you're after Radhika. Radhika, would you ask your question? Unmute yourself.
Apologies. I'll be quick. So I understand that it's not just Woodstock, but Ulster and Kingston and other communities. But we as citizens or parts of the Woodstock community, to get more people to educate, would it be good? Because there's some roads where we do see all their signs up, but there are many roads where they don't even exist. So would it be good to do a campaign where we just go house to house and talk to this? To get more signs up, because it's very powerful to find.
That's a great question, and I want to thank you for that. We do have on our website, there's a place for volunteering, and also you can write to the Woodstock Land Conservancy or STOP Woodstock National @gmail.com. and let us know if you're willing to do that. I think that's very important because we need to get the signs in Kingston. We need to get them in Ulster. Thank you very much. And Rachel Marco Havens, would you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing. And everybody for showing up. It's really nice to see how many people we can gather with Zoom meetings. I had a couple of things that came up for me. The first one is that the town, what I learned from the Niagara work around here is that the town of Ulster has bad water. They take 750,000 gallons a day. I believe it's 750. It could be 75, but I think it's actually 750 because I think that was the extra number. In that 1.75 million gallons, because 1 million was directly going to the old IBM spot, and the other was sort of unspoken, but it is there's a lot of water taken from Cooper Lake that goes to Ulster because they have bad water and they blend them. So anything that happens in Ulster regarding water would directly affect us because Cooper Lake. So that's number one in strategy thoughts. And I don't know if anyone's thought about that.
I think that's an excellent point, because the current proposal that was made in July has the clustered condominiums and townhouses massively in the town of Ulster. So that would have very serious relevance for the water. Thank you. Rachel, go ahead with your second question.
Okay, the other one is that the economic development, so SEQR, so we know, and we watched this in same again, the water, and this is like that's the deepest I've gone in dealing with local major issues. But the economic development was actually what stopped Niagara. There was a lot of people, there was a lot of voices speaking, there was everything that we're seeing now, including a SEQR review. But the actual thing that pulled them out of there was not receiving a very large economic development grant, and they were going for two different opportunities. So we should definitely be looking into economic development, finding out what kind of money and what kind of tax abatements, etc., that they would be looking for. Super important to get on that. And then
Thank you, Rachel.
The third thing that I wanted to bring up, and I'm really not trying to ruffle any feathers, and I'm definitely in very much thankful support of what's happening with the Housing Committee, but I am very fearful of getting into conversations around trying to convince them to just become like low-income housing. And so I think that it's important for us to keep our eyes open around what kind of negotiating. Of course, it's important to work with them and not just, I understand town government has to do what they have to do. But I really don't think that as a community, it makes sense for us to look into that. And then I have one other question that might not be relevant, and excuse me if it's out of context, but I think it might be relevant for those of us who are sort of counting on conservation as an option. The Open Space Institute seems to have, this is the second time I've heard about them using this as a method, but they seem to have a practice of giving the property up to the state. And that once we have a conserved property and then it's given to somebody who's supposedly handling it or stewarding it for us, and they're in a position to turn around and hand it to the state. And I will remind us all that we lost Magic Meadow. That is now owned by the state. It's a campground. It's no longer owned by the people of Woodstock. It's owned by the state. So I just want to be really careful about how much we rely upon organizations like the Open State Institute. the Open Space Institute. I don't trust them.
Yeah, thank
As a
you so much,
community member.
Rachel. And it's very helpful to know about what has worked and not worked in the past. So next I'm going to ask Deborah Dewan, and then Susan Manuel, and then Anula Cordes to speak. So let's start with Deborah. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, good evening. Thanks for this. This is great. I'll try and be brief, and hopefully with everybody talking, my thoughts didn't get too lost, but I think Woodstock National, they are the current holders of an option on the property. And we know from Terramore that Terramore went away, but the property may still be at risk. And, you know, I'm not up on everything happening there, but I will say that I think this is an opportunity, since we're coming together to try and protect what is of value to the community, both from an environmental and community perspective. It's a good opportunity for us to learn about this property and what about it is important and how we can envision it as a community. And so I would just think of it as part of our strategic thinking in Woodstock, especially since we're hopefully going to be promoting some updates to our zoning code, which have some very strict environmental controls beyond what we currently have. And I think, again, so I think this kind of, you know, it's the good news, bad news, right? We have this thing, this giant we're trying to deal with, but we also have the opportunity to use it to really learn what we value and how to make it happen. So I just would hope that, I guess my question is that I know this is an immediate issue, but I would just encourage everyone involved to stay engaged and really make sure that we're doing the best that we can for this property.
Thank you, Deborah. And I do know with Terramore that our attorney told us that zoning was the #1 way to stop a project, and that it was much less expensive than stopping it through environmental issues. So
or
thanks
the
for
courts,
that. And us,
or the courts, which get very
exactly.
expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to get that right. Susan Manuel, go ahead, hon.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I'm just wondering about the strategy and the signs being an evidence of the strategy. Okay, the first goal is to prevent the sale, I assume, this in general.
Correct.
But what if the sale goes through and there's some other kind of proposal to the planning board, and that proposal may meet the approval of some people here, but not other people here, and the campaign against this or involving this project will obviously go on for years. So is there some point where you re-strategize, you say these signs are no longer appropriate, now we have to go into stage 2? Because I've already heard the comment that the signs refer to the golf course, therefore they should come down. And I don't think the signs just refer to the golf course. I think the golf course is the most egregious part of the proposal, along with the $1 million homes. But I just hope the signs don't become sort of part of the landscape, that we have to stay dynamic and meet whatever the next development is going to be. That was just what I'm thinking.
Susan, you raised a very important point, and that we are strategizing towards that. One of the reasons why we have pushed forward with our town hall and the signs, and our steering committee has done extensive work as quickly as we have, is because we're trying to convince the developers that this is not the appropriate place for their proposal. We wanted to get that done before they purchase the property, before they close on the property. And that would save a tremendous amount of stress and aggravation and years of fighting. But stage 2 is we have to pivot to, if they do purchase the property, then there's a whole new strategy. But for right now, we're trying to put tremendous awareness out into the public of why this is so wrong for Woodstock. But you're right, it's going to require a whole second stage of strategic planning. Anula, go ahead.
Hi, I have two questions, but first I want to say thank you so much for this really informative presentation. And my first question has to do with something that somebody had posted earlier, and I have the same question. Could someone on the call please speak a little bit about Walrus Properties? Typically with an LLC, you can find out who the members are. You can find out a little bit of information about them. Have they built such developments anywhere else in the country? And I'm kind of curious if anybody has that information. That's my first
Yes,
question.
I'm gonna ask, let's answer that one first. Kevin, would you answer Anula's question, please?
Yeah, the Walrus Property LLC, in our understanding, is as a single owner. His name is Adam Sender. He's a veteran in the financial industry, and he's owned the property for a number of years, and he's had it on the market for a number of years. That's how our partners at the Open Space Institute were in a position to make an offer on the property, and Anula, I think you were also asking about Woodstock National. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was wondering, because with a single member
Yeah.
LLC, I hear a lot about WeWork, and so I'm not sure of this relationship or relationships and how these folks are all tied up together from a business and financial perspective.
Sure. As mentioned earlier, Woodstock National, in our understanding, what's been publicly reported, they have a purchase option on the property that is at some point in October. They will make a decision whether to exercise that purchase option or not. The principals, the two people that we know from their group are Evan Kleinberg and Eddie Greenberg. Evan is a veteran of the WeWork company. That's correct. He worked and rose up through the ranks in WeWork doing real estate acquisition and development, both in the US and internationally over the last 10 to 12 years, both during the dramatic expansion of WeWork's facilities around the country and around the world, and then equally dramatically during its contraction, multiple contractions, as they have worked to kind of unwind a lot of the lease agreements and contracts that they have around the world and in the US.
Thank you so much. That helps a ton. I really appreciate that. And just a comment to follow that, if folks want to learn a little bit about WeWork, there's a Hulu documentary that will give an idea of a sense of folks on this scale, how they raise all this money and what they do to little companies and to people. So I think that might be something very interesting for folks to watch, but I appreciate the ties. Thank you. And if I could ask my second question, it's more about proactive. What can we do more proactively? So for example, in the new zoning laws, I understand, and I know that Deborah Dewan is on, but my understanding is that things like wetlands and so on and so forth, precious land is removed. And so the overall acreage is lowered, meaning it restricts the development a little bit more. But I guess I'm wondering if the new zoning, if anyone on the call knows, if the new zoning laws actually prevent CEA land from being developed. And
so Anula, I'm going to interrupt you here. We have a statement that Patty's going to make about the zoning and our position on the zoning at this moment, because we're looking at how can the zoning best protect the environment. So Patty, would you share that?
Sure. And this is basically what I said when I was speaking earlier, that it's our understanding right now from what we know, both the committee and Woodstock Land Conservancy, that both the current zoning and the new proposed zoning would both limit the amount of development that could happen here, or at least would put up certain limitations. And both the STOP Woodstock National Steering Committee and separately the Woodstock Land Conservancy at the moment are studying both sets of regulations so that we can really have a clear understanding of how each one would limit this development. And I think at some point, if we get more clarity on that, it would probably be helpful if we or someone put that out, but we'll work with that, and hopefully Deborah and some other people will work with us to help clarify that. But the bottom line is that I think all of us on the call, all of us in both the committee and the Land Conservancy really feel that it's important to see this land conserved, but if development happens, that be the zoning be very strictly enforced. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's where we are now. And I would
Yeah.
say, Anula, please stay tuned and maybe work with us.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, and it's one we've been spending some time really thinking about. So I'm going to ask James Norad, and then Peter Wortman, and then Deborah Lax, and then Marjorie Schaub. So James, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm new to the Land Conservancy. Kevin, thank you for answering so many of the questions around the purchase options, but do we have a number that Walrus Properties is looking for to acquire and conserve the property? And yeah, that's basically my question.
We
take
understand that. Sure.
Go ahead,
Kevin.
Patty. Please. No, go ahead.
Brief. Well, I was going to say the number that we understand is just under 7 million as the contracted price. That is our understanding. We don't have a clear way to absolutely know that.
Do we have
the multiple listing price when the property was listed publicly for sale was 7 million?
Yeah, I guess I'm more wondering what is it worth, I guess, from a land standpoint, since it is private. What would it take to acquire that and preserve it?
Well, the devil's always in the details on that, isn't it? Yeah. I think we can't get too much into the weeds on that. Not that it's not important, it absolutely is. I think what I would say is to reiterate what I said a little bit earlier, that we are absolutely committed to helping conserve this property if at all possible. And we're confident in the outpouring of support tonight. And as Susan mentioned earlier, since the news of this proposal went public has been humbling, even to those of us who've been involved with other advocacy efforts. And we're confident that we could be in a position, again, with our partners, to make a purchase offer on this property should there be an opportunity to do so. Right now, that's complicated. There is a purchase option in place between the Woodstock National developers and Adam Sender, the owner of Walrus LLC, the principal, I should say. So, and beyond that, I would really not like to go any further into details. I don't think this is the forum for it.
Okay, I was
thank you.
And what the gap was in terms of solving this large issue. Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for your answer. I appreciate it.
Okay, and Peter Wortman, my neighbor.
Hi, Susan. As usual, thank you so much for your work on this. My question is, from this presentation, there are obviously a lot of compelling reasons to stop this development. What I'm wondering is, at some point, this may come before the planning board or a town board, various town boards. What are their arguments going to be for pushing this forward? Like, what are we fighting in terms of argument? What comes to mind, of course, is follow the money, and there may be tax incentives there. But I'm curious, like, what would the other side listening to this presentation be thinking as their counter arguments to what we're trying to do?
I think in a lot of situations like that, people who own property believe that they have the right, and they do in many cases, to do with it what they wish. And one would presume the property buyer is an LLC, so we don't know exactly who that is, because New York State LLC laws are somewhat opaque, or very opaque. But our presumption has been that it's a profit motive.
Right. No, I guess I'm asking, I understand from WeWork's perspective, they're trying to make money. What I'm trying to get is Woodstock Town Board, or looking at this proposal, what's in it for them to say yes to this? Like, we're trying to present an argument to make them say no if it comes to that. This is what happened with Terramore, that eventually the argument that was presented by the people who were trying to stop Terramore was so compelling that I mean, I was at that meeting, they kind of threw up their hands. And I'm curious, like, because no one was supporting it. And I'm wondering, in the community, what is the argument to support this development?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not actually asking for an answer. I'm just, like, as part of our strategy, I want to feel like, okay, I mean, the town or towns involved are eventually going to, if this comes to it, say yes or no, and we want them to say no. So I'm just kind of curious, like, why would they say yes? So it's just an open thing, something to think about more.
It's an interesting question, and the typical response in communities is that it brings jobs and economic vitality. You know, we have declining enrollment in our schools, but although this would be the Kingston School District, FYI. So it's a good question, and I think that I feel confident that the developers are either on this call right now, or they're going to listen to the recording. And what I'm hoping is that they will see how many obstacles are in their way.
Yeah. Well, as I said, with Terramore, that actually, you know, tipped the scales. So certainly hopeful. Thank you all. I really appreciate the presentation.
Thanks, Peter. Deborah Lax, go ahead, hon.
Hi. Maybe this is naive of me, because I believe that people maybe still have a conscience, but where is the owner in all this, in terms of, have any efforts been made to reach out to the owner, to engage that person or that entity in discussions with us directly? I know, like, when a property goes up for sale, you can have a bidding war, and the owner ultimately decides who they sell to. And it could be just based on the fact, I like you more. But if the owner is, I don't know if they're a resident of the area, but I would hope they care something about this environment. And has anyone tried to speak to the owner? Just in terms of engaging them in this conversation.
Yes.
So Deborah, in just a moment, I'm going to ask Kevin to answer this, but I can tell you that someone has spoken to the owner's mother at length. So anyone who knows anyone, we are talking to anyone who'll listen. Okay. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Well, I hope he listens to his mother.
Yeah, I feel the need to be a little careful here. I think it's people have, they own a property, they have the right to sell a property. We have had communications with the owner in the past. We were treated very respectfully, and I've already talked about the previous purchase offer that was made. And beyond that, I really, I don't feel like it would be appropriate to, you know, vilify anybody or anything like that. That's really not, that's not our MO. Thanks.
Oh, I'm not
Kevin.
suggesting we vilify the person. I'm just saying engage them in the conversation.
Can we persuade them? And I think that seeing signs everywhere, hearing people talking about it, sharing anyone, sharing the emails, sharing the recording, communicating on social media, in letters to the editor, that people begin to question. And let's see. So thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. And I don't think it's naive. I think it's important. And next is Laura Rickey. Oh, no, did Marjorie? You didn't go. I'm sorry, Marjorie, you're next, and then Laura Rickey. Marjorie Schaub, you want to unmute yourself?
I did. I want to thank you for all the work you've done. It's just monumental accomplishment. And I'm new to this. I been in a sense involved in kind of parallel situations in other places. Number one, water. I don't know what the planning board is planning to do, but we so underestimate the value of our water. And with more population, there's more sewage, more pollution, more drainage, even, from cars or whatever on roads. It's the economic story of how many cows can survive on an acre. And is whether we can pursue the water angle, because that really always is underestimated. New York Times had a series of articles on the fact of how we're abusing our water supply. And just because we're here doesn't mean that we should not consider that before we don't have water, and then talk about community development. That would go down the tube if we don't have water.
Yeah, Marjorie, you're absolutely right. Rachel Marco Havens brought up the water issues in the town in Ulster, and Paul Rubin spoke to the issues of how close the Kingston Reservoir is to the proposed development. And so we know that it will affect Kingston, Ulster, and Woodstock's water supplies. And Paul Rubin is ready to do the research. And we're going to take one last question now from Laura Rickey. Thank you so much, everyone. And Laura, your last question of the night.
Okay, I guess it's, forgive me, more of a statement than a question, just a couple of things. One thing is, yes, I agree with the last comment, one of the last comments. It's the Woodstock Planning Board that will decide this. The Woodstock Town Board is, we do the laws. The Woodstock Planning Board is an independent entity. I, as a town board member, can't tell them what to do. It is the Woodstock Planning Board, an independent group, that does make decisions. My recommendation is that perhaps you do go, Peter Cross is the chair. I believe Judy Kerman, who's on the call here, is the vice chair. But you may want to have a hypothetical conversation with Peter. He can't give you a definitive answer because they don't have definitive proposal yet. But he might be able to tell you what kinds of cases have they denied? What kinds of cases would they deny? And by him explaining what criteria by which he could use to deny the case, you might be able to pinpoint and prove those points that he says might deny it. The other thing that I do want to say, and personally, I'm appalled. I am personally appalled at the golf course. I'm personally appalled at the heliport. I'm personally appalled at the devastation of the environment. But Peter could also tell you, is the CEA, that somebody asked earlier, does the new law prohibit things in the CEA? No, the CEA gives the planning board guidance. If it's a CEA, you can be stricter, and it gives the planning board the ability to be stricter. But the other thing I want to say is the new law being proposed, and the town board just approved today. We had a quick town board meeting to talk about the budget, and we did approve a public hearing on the new law on our October 17th meeting. October 17th, 7 p.m. Cuomo is the first public hearing meeting on the new law. What Deborah didn't mention—
The new zoning regulations?
Yeah.
the new zoning for the housing. It's the 260 zoning plus 202, which is subdivision, the extensive to improve affordable housing ability. But the other thing critical about that law, which I'm hoping it does get approved by the board, is because it forces conservation subdivision. When you have a large subdivision, what conservation subdivision means.
Laura, I'm going to interrupt you here because
Okay.
we are going to be doing our own research to look at the old zoning and the new zoning. It's very, very complex, and we don't want to have any preempting of that research right now.
The conservation subdivision, I recommend you look into it, because conservation subdivision, if somebody is going to do development, it preserves large tracts of land. That's the whole point of conservation subdivision.
Yes.
But you'll do your research, and Susan,
we're very aware of
I'm happy to answer any questions, Susan, if you want to reach out to me, because as you know, Susan, we worked together on Terramore, and Terramore was a great success due to everybody's input. But the point there was we found a legal way to stop it. I know my research for Terramore was here's where the law doesn't support it, and we need to find ways for the law to not support this. And if you have feedback for the current proposed law that would help in these cases, please give that feedback.
Yeah, and I might say that if people are interested in hearing more from Peter Cross, in hearing more about the zoning regulations, if there's a groundswell of desire to have those conversations, we could perhaps set up another town hall meeting and invite Peter and invite the zoning people and just have both some information presented followed by some conversation, and that might be helpful.
And I'm just, we had hoped to be finished by 8:30, but I do see Judith Kerman, who is on our planning board and is involved in the housing task force. And I feel like it wouldn't be a disservice to not give you an opportunity, Judith, as our final question.
Thank you, Susan, for doing that. I want to make a point. As we can tell from the situation of the Dunkin' Donuts recently with the town of Hurley, a planning board is constrained by law. It is my opinion, sorry, Susan, it is my opinion that the new zoning will give us more tools to make sure that the right kinds of things happen. We don't yet know what the proposal is going to be. We don't have a proposal yet. I can't say what our decision is going to be, except I can tell you, whatever you think of the Saugerties Planning Board, the Woodstock Planning Board is very ecologically minded, but we have to have the law to support us. We can't make a decision that violates the zoning law. And the current zoning law doesn't give us very good tools. And that's all I will say.
Judith, I 100% agree with
Thank
you that
Judith.
the zoning is key. The zoning is what our attorney for Terramore said. That is your ticket. The zoning is what's going to, and you're right about Dunkin' Donuts. So we have to get the zoning right. And we're all really, really looking carefully at all the possible ways that can be analyzed. So thank you for all the work you've done on that, and everyone else on this call. There's so many people here who have been really active and supportive in our community. Thank you to the artists, the musicians, the writers, the filmmakers who have helped us, all the people. It has been honestly breathtaking to see the rapid response, the deep involvement, the commitment, the willingness to give of your time. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here tonight. And we look forward, please sign up for our with the Woodstock Land Conservancy to get our emails. Go to our Facebook page, Stop Woodstock National. Go to our website, stopwoodstocknational.org. Join us, see you at the Scarecrow Fest, and come to our booth. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.